Hi, welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to continue looking at the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. So, on the previous video, we looked at at what causes us to move along the aggregate demand curve, and they were the wealth effect, the interest rate effect, and the international trade effect. Whenever you get it, whenever you get inflation, whenever you get an increases in price, that's going to move you along or a decrease in prices for that matter is going to move you along the aggregate demand curve, and that's going to change the aggregate demand, and that's going to change production, gross domestic product. So that's moving along the aggregate demand curve. So the language I'm going to use is these are the stories that we tell for moving along the aggregate demand curve, and I'll use that language later on. Now, if we're going to move along the aggregate demand curve, we also have to shift the aggregate demand curve. So when we talk about shifting the aggregate demand curve, then we're back to talking about the concept of determinants. And so we had these, here we have the determinants for aggregate demand, and it looks like a lot, and I would recommend for you guys who are taking notes to hit pause right now and to write these down into your notes and then start the video back up. But before you do so, just understand that this looks like a lot. It looks like a lot of stuff right here that you have to remember. All these things are aggregate demand determinants that will shift the aggregate demand curve. But the key to this, and what makes it not so bad, is that really these are the same exact determinants as we did in the aggregate expenditure model. They are the same determinants that we did in the aggregate expenditure model. So anything that caused the aggregate expenditure curve to, did I just say that wrong? These are all the determinants. I'm not sure if I said this right. Let me re-say it. These are all the same determinants as we did in the aggregate expenditure model. So anything that shifted the aggregate expenditure curve up will cause the same thing will cause the aggregate demand curve to shift to the right. And anything that causes the aggregate expenditure curve to shift down will, in this model, cause the aggregate demand curve to shift to the left. And we'll do plenty of examples once we get to the graphs on this stuff. So for example, government spending. Government spending would cause the aggregate, if you increased government spending, that would cause the aggregate expenditure curve to shift up. We did that on previous videos. Well, in this model, it just causes the aggregate demand curve to shift to the right. Or if you decrease government spending, that would cause the aggregate expenditure curve to shift down, or the aggregate demand curve to shift to the left. So we don't want to make this harder than it is. All of these are just the same. All these aggregate demand determinants are just the same as the aggregate expenditure determinants for the aggregate expenditure model. It's the same stuff. Just instead of shifting the curve up and down, we're shifting the curve right and left. Now, there are a couple things that I've added here, so let me just highlight those. A couple things that I've added. One would be, I'm using this language here, fiscal policy. Down here I use the language fiscal policy. I probably should have used that language right here. I probably should have said this was fiscal policy. So fiscal policy, for now, we will get into more specific definitions of this later on, but for now, what we're going to say about fiscal policy is just when the government changes taxes, or when the government changes spending in order to try to influence the macro economy. That's our real quick definition of fiscal policy. And then I also added this term, monetary policy. And monetary policy just means that the government uses control of the money supply to try to control the economy through interest rates. And we will talk about that in detail on a later video. So for now, I'm just kind of labeling these. And by the way, I probably should have put monetary policy right here as well. Monetary policy tries to affect interest rates and therefore affect investment or consumption, shift the aggregate demand curve, and affect the economy. So we'll talk about that more when we get to some graphs. Then I added this kind of crazy looking formula down here, and But all I'm doing on this formula is I'm just taking all the determinants and I'm just writing them in the form of a formula. So I'm saying the gross domestic product, which also is total spending, which also at this point is also aggregate demand. The gross domestic product is a function of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. We've been saying that for a long time through a lot of videos. Now the other thing that we're adding to this is what are the things that are going to affect consumption, and they are going to be savings, wealth, taxes, expected future prices and income. And then I should have, and I apologize, fix this in your notes, I should also have interest rates here. And I'm going to back that up and I'm going to write it in black just to be consistent here. You'll see why that matters in a second. So I also would want interest rates to be in here somewhere inside of these parentheses. And then what are the things that affect investment? The things that affect investment and would shift the curve are business conditions, business taxes, and there's interest rates again. Oh, I really should have made interest rates green right there. I'll do that, but it'll probably be really hard to see. Technically, that interest rates, that should be a green R, so that's probably really hard to see, so whatever. And then we come here to government spending, and then net exports, which is determined by foreign income and nominal exchange rates. Those are all the things that shift the curve through net exports, government spending, investment, and consumption. Now, the new thing that's in there that we did not talk about before are prices. Right here, prices. That's the prices of all goods and services in the economy. So these are the things, prices. Those are the things that cause us to move along the aggregate demand curve. Those are the things that cause us to move along the aggregate demand curve. So anything that's written in black, green, or blue are curve shifters. Foreign income, nominal exchange rate, government spending, interest rates, business taxes, business conditions, expectations of future prices and income, interest rate, taxes, wealth, savings. All those things in black, blue, or green are things that cause the aggregate demand curve to shift. And then all the things here, the prices written in red, they are moving us along the aggregate demand curve. Those are moving us along the aggregate demand curve. So we had the things that moved us along the aggregate demand curve. They were really prices through the wealth effect, interest rate effect, and international trade effect. And then we also have the things that will cause the curve to shift. And anything other than the price level causes the change in CI, G, and NX will cause a shift in the aggregate demand curve. Those are the things up here that are black, blue, green, red. Those are our determinants. Those are the curve shifters. We'll spend a lot more time on that in future videos, but for now, you just want to make sure that you have these determinants written down and knowing that they are nothing new here. They are just the determinants from the aggregate expenditure model. All right, this has been Mr. Hagan, another podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.